The following is a presentation of the Broadband Universe, brought to you in part by Vitruvi, the end-to-end GIS-based construction management platform that connects asset owners, operators, general contractors, and subcontractors for unmatched project control and collaboration. Manage every aspect of your telecommunications or utility infrastructure construction program with Vitruvi. Build faster, reduce costs, improve quality. Book your demo today on vitruvisoftware.com to see how we can help you build at scale. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Broadband Universe podcast. I'm Craig Corbin, and it is a pleasure to welcome my guest today, the CEO of NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, Shirley Bloomfield. Shirley, welcome again to the Broadband Universe.
Greg, it is always a pleasure to join you and talk about some of these issues that are so very, very important right now.
You know, as we were sharing before we began the conversation, what an exciting time in this industry. And obviously with NTCA and the organizations that are represented across this country, this really is a golden age in communications and broadband. And to get things started, I think in that we're in the new year, and a belated Happy New Year, I think it might be appropriate to start with sort of a State of the Union from your perspective.
So I think the state of this industry is this is a moment in time. And it's something that, I've been reflecting a lot on, whether it's, New Year's always cause you to reflect a little bit and look backwards and look forwards. And I think about how many years we have talked about the importance of broadband, regardless of where you live. I know that people have said over and over again ad nauseum, what the pandemic has taught us as a country about the need for connectivity, the services that can be provided, the economic relevance of making sure that robust broadband gets spread out. But I look at all of those pieces combined with these funding programs, this formal recognition of the importance of connecting Americans, particularly rural Americans. Yeah. And I think we are at that juncture where we're ready to go. I think there's still a few speed bumps that we've got out there, really still thinking about what are those impacts going to be from supply chain issues, from workforce availability, and making sure that funding goes in the right places and that there's the right amount of accountability. But at the end of the day, I look at this and I say, this is truly a historic moment in time to get the job done. And I know, speaking on behalf of my membership, they are ready to go.
Well, you look at you made mention of the incredible amounts of funding that are available. A big part of that, obviously, the Reconnect program initiated by former Georgia governor and then Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue, but a number of different mechanisms within that program. Talk about how that has been so important for the membership of NTCA.
So it is one of those things. So the Reconnect program that you referenced, under USDA, is one of those programs where sometimes people are surprised that there's broadband funding at the Department of Agriculture. And, right. From our perspective, that has long been a funding source. Long ago when it was the REA program, transitioning to the RUS, Rural Utility Service program. So having Reconnect be a federal program that really focuses on funding for rural America, in our minds, makes perfect sense. But I know kind of the mystery of all of USDA for other providers in this space. But, that program is so important because it's administered by an agency that really understands rural America. They really understand the challenges that distance can provide. They really understand the implications of what it means for smart ag and precision ag and the ability to potentially create and generate more interest in people moving back to rural America. So in our minds, USDA is a perfect place to have a program that really recognizes that. And to that end, NTCA members have long utilized RUS as a lending program. So now having this Reconnect grant and loan program to deploy broadband makes perfect sense. And so to that end, our member companies have been really utilizing this fully. They have been very engaged. To date, they've gotten well over $1 billion in the resources that have been available. The other thing that I will say that I love about what RUS is doing there, they have probably, in a lot of ways, been leading in terms of setting higher speeds, creating more expectation, doing more checking on the ground for where is their existing infrastructure, where does new infrastructure need to go. So I also think that a lot of other agencies that are getting poised, NTIA in particular, to roll out through the states this funding, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the way Reconnect has actually managed this program.
You touched on something that is so vitally important with respect to having the appropriate information with which to make decisions for the distribution of funding. And I know there's been a lot going on of late with the initial data map that came out, and of course the second iteration that will be coming in June. That is the version that will be used for the distribution of much of the RDOF funding. From your perspective, what have you heard from membership with respect to questions perhaps to the accuracy or the veracity of the maps to this point?
So all I can say, Craig, is if I had one job I had to pick that I wouldn't want, it would be being in charge of mapping. Because talk about a thankless task, right? Because no matter what you do, whatever you put together is going to be out of date the second you do it. So yeah, there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of locations that don't make sense, there's a lot of challenges going on. I think there's a benefit to remembering that this first step is really the state allocation. So this first iteration is really about how much will Illinois get versus what Montana will get. Is it still really important to get as accurate as possible? Absolutely. Is it still really important to make sure there's a challenge process so that if, that rock in the middle of your field is showing up as a multi-dwelling unit, that you have the ability to say there actually is nobody living in that field? Yes, those are all really, really important. But I think getting hung up at this stage when I think the states already have a pretty good idea of what their allocation will be, I think reconciling that with the speed with which the agencies would like to move. And I think there's a balance in there somewhere. But I do know that the folks who are actually tasked with working on this mapping are working 24/7 to get it into a workable process. The challenges are important. And I think being able to go through those challenge processes, having Congress keep their eye on that has been very valuable. So I appreciated greatly the number of members of Congress that weighed in to say, hey, we really got to make sure this is done right. So I think all eyes are watching, but yeah, that is a thankless task no matter what you do, no matter what resources you have to pull those maps together.
Well, and we will hope for the best and be able to watch that as it progresses, because it is so important with regard to the immense amount of funding that will play a role in distributing. Before we leave that particular topic, one of the other things that might be of note now is the status of the Universal Service Fund, and that is something that has been around for quite a while, but a lot of people don't know perhaps even what it is, what it does, and where it stands today. Give us an update.
So the Universal Service Program is like one of those unsung heroes in my mind. It is a program that actually got codified in the 96 Act, but had been around since 1935, that really basically said that all Americans, regardless of where you live, should have the right and the ability to access comparable, affordable communication, then telephone service, now broadband service.
Right.
Really, really important principles when we talk about, what will it take to reach all parts of the country. So universal service, unlike these other federal programs that you see coming down the pike now, BEAD and Reconnect, has really been a cost recovery mechanism. So the heart of that program is saying, the difference between providing service in a high-cost rural community versus downtown Washington, D.C. is X over Y. So how do we support the ability of entities to provide that service to consumers at a rate they can afford? If you were to look at what it might cost a consumer to actually get the services they get in a rural community, it's well over the price that they're actually paying. Universal service is that differential. It is the piece that makes it affordable and that allows carriers to recover their costs when they are extraordinarily high. So it's a really, really important program. And I think the other components that are important is the support it provides for schools and libraries, rural hospitals, low income. So there's a number of components that have really helped us infiltrate and push technology into the hands of those who might not typically be able to access them. Now, easier said than done. It's it's not sexy. It's a maintenance program.
Right.
It's a cost recovery program. That's never as sexy as grant money being plopped out on the table.
Yeah.
So thinking through how do we continue to fund that program? Who should pay into that program to make sure that there are the resources there to continue it? And we frankly also have some legal challenges that have been filed in some of the district courts. Okay. That if these court cases come out, on the wrong side and say basically that the FCC cannot administer universal service programs, that will throw into disarray hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people's ability to access affordable, comparable services. Right. So, we're working with Congress to make sure everybody understands what is the Universal Service Program, why is it so important, right, and what role does it play complementary to all of this funding coming down the road. Because at the end of the day, Craig, if you can't build a network, make it affordable, and sustain that network, then I don't know what you've really done. Then you've kind of done a shot in the arm, but you've walked away from a lot of investment.
And we are well past the point where a Band-Aid approach is anywhere near what is essential. We're talking about a transformational time in this nation with regard to providing those services to those, especially in the rural areas that desperately need it. One of the other components of this golden age, if you will, and the coming investment in it is potential workforce challenges that are part of the program. And when you talk about building networks, expanding footprint, it takes people, boots on the ground to get that done.
Takes a lot of people, and if we're going to listen to GAO, it's going to take 23,000 more people to get the job done. And you start to think about, if you can develop that workforce, where are they going to go? Are they going to go to Kansas City, or are they going to go to Dickinson, North Dakota? Right. So for us, that is why this moment in time is so interesting, because on one hand, there are so many opportunities, and our member companies here at NTCA, over 80% of them have provided fiber to the home technology. 80% of their customers have access to fiber to the home technology. That's huge. That means they have been building out. But what I love about what they're doing is they're thinking about, where else can I go? Who else can I partner with? What communities near me are unserved or underserved? So it's a real opportunity for my companies to be part of the solution here. But for the fact that, where do you get the employees to do this? So we've actually worked with the White House. They recently had a talent pipeline challenge that we were a part of, and we came to the table and said, yeah, we too are thinking about this all the time. How do we do a couple of things? How do we train that workforce? What kind of opportunities there? More to follow when we get to our time in a few weeks, but I will share that we have been working very closely with Northwood Community College and their Broadband Academy to think about what kind of training can we make accessible to our companies all across the country for those who don't have access to that. We've also been thinking about, how do you make these careers cool? How do we get those K through 12 to say, you know what, you may not have thought about a career in broadband, but you utilize broadband every day. Thinking about where our members are engaged in their esport teams. How do you think about recruiting those esport players that you're sponsoring in high school into being your next interns or your IT staff? How do we think about making these careers highlighting them, how attractive they can be, and thinking through those workforce issues. But yeah, it is really important. And how do we keep our guys competitive when they're competing against a large nationwide provider for that same talent? So a lot to be thinking about right now, Greg.
Yeah, well, we look forward to hearing more about that particular topic at our time coming up in a couple of weeks. But it is exciting to know that there are more of the younger generation that are realizing that there are many rewarding career paths in this industry with tremendous upward mobility. And so we will be watching that again with great interest.
And if I could just jump in there, one of the things I shared with the White House that I think is so unique about jobs in our sector is you can start off as a lineman, you can start off as the IT person, but you know what? In a community-based broadband provider, you can end up in the corner office. Watching the career trajectory. I've worked for large nationwide carriers. You don't have that capacity to become the CEO or the CFO or the COO quite as easily as these community-based providers, which is really exciting to be able to take your vision and move yourself into a leadership position. So I think we've got an advantage as long as we can help people understand that.
Absolutely. You're watching the Broadband Universe podcast, brought to you by Lit Communities. Light up your community. You deserve better internet. By Vetro Fiber Map, radically simpler fiber management. And by Vitruvi, build faster, reduce costs, and improve quality. My guest today, Shirley Bloomfield, CEO of NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association. And one of the things that's so vitally important with what NTCA provides to the membership is the ability to represent them in Washington, D.C. There is so much going on, especially now that you've sort of touched on a little bit. What are the priorities from a policy standpoint for the organization?
Oh, the list is so long. Because, keeping in mind that, we're keeping an eye on, what is right on the table right now and what's going to be on the table in the days ahead. So, Craig, I appreciate your asking. I think it will be a couple of things. Obviously, we touched on universal service, ensuring people understand, the importance that program plays and the role that Congress potentially plays in that. I would also say, education. We've got a lot of new members of Congress in the 118th Congress. How do we bring them into the fold of understanding the challenges and the opportunities surrounding rural broadband? What does it take? Why is it so expensive? Why are technologies so important? I think to that end, also, continuing to promote the idea that we, again, as you and I've talked about, it's a moment in time. Let's use the future forward technology. Let's be thinking about fiber where fiber can be put into the ground. Let's do this right the first time. Let's aim higher and do better. And I think those are things that we'll also be sharing with policymakers. And then there's a lot of other things in the ecosystem. As we think about cybersecurity, you're building these networks. How do we protect these networks? How do we make sure that we can manage some of that? And I would also say that the other thing that I think is a little bit unique about NTCA is we also keep our eye on the rural ecosystem. What is good for rural America? What policies can we be supporting that continue to potentially promote that rural renaissance? How do we make rural, America attractive? And what are the services that broadband providers can bring to the table that really assist those efforts? So the list is long. But the team is ready, and what I love about what we do is we are grassroots oriented. So it is all about our members out there on the ground talking about building smart rural communities, what it takes, what they're doing, sharing their stories, and we look forward to having them come out to Washington this spring.
Absolutely. And one of the things when you talk about membership and the growth that is out there all across the country are partnerships. And I think one of the things that has been interesting to me, in particular in Vermont, just for example, the CUDs, the Communication Union Districts, where they now have the ability for multiple municipalities to work together to build communication infrastructure. That has to be an exciting development from your standpoint.
We think a lot about partnerships here, Craig, because again, as I mentioned, I think my members have pretty much done a lot of the job in their incumbent service territories. But I think the ability to look outside to say, where are there communities of need? And they get reached out to all the time. But some of that will take partnerships, and I think it's sharing the opportunity, it's sharing the risk. And I have loved what I have seen. We've got some folks who are working with their counterparts in the electric co-op space That has been very exciting. Their ability to create some scope and scale with the rural communities. You referenced Vermont. We've got some interesting partnerships there. I literally had a company out in Kansas the other day that won one of their state grants, partnering with a tribal entity and a municipality. Wow. Win, 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 right? It is that ability to say, and I think one of the things we're going to see with BEAD is we're going to see more local governments, more municipalities who are in underserved areas, thinking about what their role will be in providing broadband. And my answer to that would be look to partner with somebody who actually knows the business, who knows the technology, but figure out a way to come together. And so we're going to be doing a lot of work with organizations in the coming days that represent municipalities, trying to educate them as to who our members are, why they're good partners to have, and maybe put a few folks together.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you touched on that is so vital to that discussion is the ability to share knowledge and get people up to speed so much more quickly and keep them between the lines and so that they don't have to make mistakes in the process. So a very exciting opportunity, I think, for so many groups across the country.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I cannot wait to fast forward 5 years from now and to kind of be able to look back and reflect and say, aha, this was the moment everybody kind of went off and really, really worked to get the job done. So yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities. And the thing that I also love is people really thinking critically about who are those major stakeholders that I could work with. And whether it's municipality, maybe it's your local farm bureau, maybe it is your local, grain cooperative. Who are those entities? We've got a moment to really be thinking very outside the box.
And the end users always benefit because those type of organizations are already invested in their respective communities. And that's such a big part of that equation. One of the things that we wanted to spend some time with today in our conversation is an important point in the calendar each and every year. That's RTIME, and what a phenomenal event that is going to be this year. San Diego, and the theme, Make This Moment Count. I can't wait. We're weeks away, but in looking at the agenda, it is going to be action-packed. Talk about that if you would.
It will be action-packed. So if you're coming, wear your track shoes. All I'm going to say is we are looking to put every topic that seems to be timely, top of mind, critical, whether it's industry, technology, regulatory, legislative, business-oriented, workforce development, supply chain development. All of those topics are going to be, front and center. And the thing that I think is the most powerful about this meeting, Craig, while I think the programming is excellent, obviously, it's the hallway discussions. It's getting people together. It's having people go through an expo and see something that's innovative and attractive and think, how can I actually apply that? It's the conversations when CEOs gather together over a beer and say, are you doing this and how are you doing that? And it's that problem solving and collaboration that really, really I love, and where I think coming back into these in-person meetings fully 100 miles an hour is so important, because it is that sharing, it's the collaboration, it is that networking that I think really moves this sector of the industry forward. So we are very excited about all of those things that we're going to be talking about.
Some phenomenal speakers on the agenda and some great panel discussions. And I know that right off the bat on the first full day on Monday, we really have a phenomenal opportunity. Talk about that if you would.
So we have, we were hoping to be able to get a few folks from government agencies to come out and join us. And at the end of the day, that doesn't always come together. It's easier for them to talk to our folks when they're here in DC. But the beauty was we were able to take that opportunity and say, all right, universal service and the future of universal service, top of mind for my companies. So we're going to be talking about contribution reform and where that fits in and where that's going. But the other panel that I'm very excited about is thinking through the ecosystem. What does it take to create success in the rural broadband space? And we're going to be highlighting some things that we are doing with Corning on the supply chain front, with Northwoods on the workforce training front, and with Calix in terms of some of the work we've been doing with our Smart Rural Community Program, thinking about what does fiber add to the home valuations? What does that look like? Why is that important as we think about economic development and the purpose and the value of fiber? So I think having some of those external players sharing some of their thoughts with us, and then always having those speakers who force us, give us that reprieve to be a little bit of our own futurist, to be thinking about, okay, like I know we're all in the moment going, a million miles a minute, but let's stop and think, where are we going to be? Where do we need to go? What are the innovations that are out there? So all of those things will be teed up as we kick off this meeting, Craig.
So exciting. And you made mention briefly a moment ago, the expo, congratulations, by the way, sold out. That's a phenomenal indication of just how much value that people in the industry place on the ability to be in front of the NTCA membership in that setting. There is nothing that will compare with the electricity, excitement in the air on the expo floor.
I love the expo. And, one of the things that we always do is we kind of make sure that we go from our opening general session into the expo hall, because I think it's the right way to set that tone of like, all right, what's out there? What should we be thinking about? What are others doing? And who are the new vendors in this space? And from the sold out perspective, it also shows, I think, how many people are finally recognizing how important it is to get in front of rural broadband providers, and that these companies have been the leading edge and these companies are the innovators. So I think the expo is going to be really a lot of fun, and I always love that time in the meeting. So looking forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to get there. February 19th through the 22nd, the Manchester Grand Hyatt in San Diego, in such a phenomenal area there in San Diego. So many things to do. And one thing I did want to mention, if for some reason anyone watching is not able to attend, there are ways that you can take advantage of RTIME remotely. Share with us about that.
Yeah, so you know what? We have not let go of that virtual world, because you know what? We've learned a lot of lessons, right, about how we can actually be engaged even when we can't travel, or we may only have a day that we can devote to it. So yes, we are going to be actually offering the ability to stream some of the opening sessions,
Nice.
some of the key programming. It'll be hard to go through an expo hall, but
Sure.
there's certain pieces that you have to kind of give as you're talking about doing kind of that virtual opportunity. But I think that ability to hear in real time, the speakers, the information that's being shared. We're going to have Andy Burke, the RUS administrator. We talked earlier about the Reconnect program. Having Andy in his first opportunity as a newly minted RUS administrator to meet our members, to talk to our members, with potentially more money coming down the pike as the farm bill gets negotiated. All of those kinds of speakers, to hear from those people, regardless of whether you're there with us in the general session or you're sitting at your desk. What a great opportunity.
Make this moment count. Love the theme for this year's event. Cannot wait to see you and the NTCA team there in San Diego. Greatly appreciate your time today in sharing with us what's going on in the organization and a preview of RTIME.
Craig, I always appreciate your interest, your proactive nature, in this broadband space, the leading role you're playing in sharing some of this information. So thank you, and we're excited to have you come out and join us.
Absolutely. And on behalf of Shirley, thanks for letting us be a part of your day. We'll see you next time right here on the Broadband Universe. So long, everyone.